Alright, enough stalling. It's time to get started building my P-51. I've decided I'm going to do a complete build-up video series of this kit. I haven't done one of these in a while, and probably not anything that's going to be quite on this level of complexity. Because probably the only kits I've ever built that have anywhere near the level of complexity of this kit are some of the really high-end Gundam perfect grade kits. And I don't even know if those would really compare to this. I think it's fair to say that this may actually be the most complex model I will ever have undertaken in my entire career as a modeler. So it's going to be interesting to get working on. The assembly begins starting with the engine, the Packard Merlin 1650 engine, which was introduced to the P-51D series. It's a V12 engine capable of producing, if my information is correct, capable of producing 1,450 horsepower. So a little bit more than your car can probably put out, I would say. The engine itself comprises the first 6 complete steps of the build-up, so pretty involved. I've built kits, entire kits, that probably aren't as complicated as this engine is. So I've got all the different runners that I'm going to need for assembly of the engine, as well as my clippers. I got a hobby knife down here somewhere. I got some glue. I got the photo etch sets, which I need to open up. I need to actually grab some super glue for that, and some toothpicks to aid me in application of said super glue. So let's get started. So first step of assembly involves runner H. We're going to assemble the crankcase. So you can see there's part H25, which is 1/2 of the crankcase. Anyway, so next up is part H20, which is the frame for the crankcase. So now we're going to do a quick test fit to make sure that the components fit together properly. And yeah, looks good. But you can see that is the first part of step 1, that is the assembled crankcase. Right under my finger there, that is the joint between the two halves. There's almost no seam there visible at all. And this is not glued together yet. In fact, the two parts fit with the frame components so tightly that they stay together just on their own. Next up, we've got the cylinders. The left cylinder is parts H11 and H8. A little bit of test fitting, and everything looks good. And because these parts are open on the inside, once they're actually attached together, I'm actually going to take my my glue here, and I'm going to touch the end of the brush on the inside surface. So it'll use that capillary action we talked about in my Modeling 101 series, and it'll flow glue through the entire joint. You'll end up with a very solid, secure, permanent glued joint. And this way there's no chance of marring the exterior surface of the part. Next up is cylinder head for that side, which calls for part number H6. You may not be able to quite make it out on the video, but the stub, the way that this part was connected to the runner is actually, instead of being on the side of the part and then having to trim it and possibly scar the part, the connection point is actually right here on the underside, so it's on a smooth surface that's really easy to trim off, like so. And this is actually the surface that'll be glued to the cylinder walls, so you know there's no risk of damaging any exposed area. So it's a very nice touch of them to design it like that. And now, again, you'll want to do some test fitting. Make sure. Also, you'll want to make sure that you've got the part oriented in the correct direction, because you don't want to accidentally end up installing the part backwards and then realize, because it does fit backwards, though not securely. But if you were to attach it backwards and then realize later on, well, oh, how did I go and do that? That was a pretty stupid mistake. So refer very closely to your instructions, it's the same as what they say in woodworking: measure twice, cut once, test fit twice, glue once. That way you know you haven't made a mistake. Now I'm just applying a little bit of glue specifically to where the locator pins are placed, and then I'm going to add a little bit on the mating surface before I actually attach them, so that way there's a good solid joint between the two halves, or between the two parts, and there's lots of cement to glue it together, so there's no risk of anything coming apart. And make sure that you've got everything very, very well aligned. Looking good. And from here then there's just a little detail part that goes on the outside. I'm not sure what it is. It might be a manifold of some kind. So this is part number H2. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Some sort of manifold or linkage maybe on the outside surface of the cylinder wall. If you look on the ends, there's a little bit of excess plastic on the end of it. That's I've always wondered what those were for, but I think I've figured out recently they're supposed to be little handles. Like I've got my gator clip here holding it by. They're little handles by which to hold the part while you either paint it or attach it to another surface. Because it's a very small part, there's not a lot of surface to grab onto, so they give you this extra little bit of plastic that you can grab, so that you can hold your part stable. But in this case, we won't be needing them, so we'll just trim them off with our hobby knife, very gently, because this is a very, very thin and fragile part, and we're 1.5 steps into this build so far, and we don't want to break something. So I've gone and test fit that part, and everything fits correctly, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove it and apply, the same as before, just a little tiny bit of adhesive to each of the contact points. This is why I like the thin cement, because it has the really fine tip applicator, so you can be really, really precise with your glue. And there we go. That's one cylinder finished. And so then we move on to the other cylinder, but it's basically the same process as the other one, so I won't bother to show all of it. So now we've got our two assembled cylinder banks, as well as the crankcase. I've also gone and attached the oil pan to it. So next up, we're going to get into some of the interesting stuff. This is where we start using some of the photo etch. The first few photo etch parts attach to, again, I'm not really sure what a lot of these parts are. They're not labeled on the diagrams, but this looks like it's probably some sort of manifold or an air cooler device or something. But there's 3 metal photo etch parts that fit onto these 3 little blocks. So let's open up our photo etch set. This kit actually includes 2 different photo etch sets, and the pouch doesn't want to open for me. So you've got one that's got mostly your detail parts, a lot of stuff for the engine. These are the bulkhead supports for the machine guns, some vents and some grates and grills, and a lot of hinges for all of the control surfaces, like your flaps and rudders and whatnot, are all of these right here. The other set has a few detail parts, such as your seat belts and harnesses, but mostly it appears to be just the metal contact points for the magnets. As I said in the unboxing video that I did a few weeks ago, I guess a few months ago now, the cowlings for the engine, as well as a few other parts on this model, are removable via magnets. So these 4 parts, plus I believe these 4 and these 3 and a couple of others, are the contact points for the magnets to attach these parts to the fuselage. But the parts that we're going to use right now are these three in the top left corner. Like I said before, I'm really not sure what they are. I really have got to learn to do more research when it comes to these videos, but I'm a lazy man. Now, I like to use one of these cutting mats. This one has seen better days. It's a couple of years old. It's got some glue spots on it and some paint spots on it, and it's a little scarred up here and there, but it still works great. I like to use them because they're good and solid, and they won't damage your hobby knife blade. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to trim off one of these photo etch parts to start. Alright, so that is one of these little tiny photo etch parts for the engine. So ordinarily what you would want to do is wherever the part came off of the runner, you would really want to use a file to file down and smooth out the where the connection point was, but I actually did a pretty good job of keeping that clean. There doesn't appear to be any scarring of any kind on there, so there's not really a worry. So we're going to set that down for right now. Now I've got just the baggie that the parts came in, and I've got my super glue. This is Zap cyanoacrylate super glue. This is their thin formula, as opposed to their Zappa Gap, which is in the green bottle, which is their thicker gap filling formulation. This stuff I find easier to use with photo etch because, like the Tamiya thin cement, it functions via capillary action to glue parts together more securely. So I like to use the baggie just to put a little puddle of glue onto, and I got a toothpick here. I like toothpicks because they're disposable and they got a pretty sharp point on them, so you can be fairly precise with them. And just dip your toothpick into the glue and just apply wherever you need. Apply sparingly though, because super glue is generally pretty strong. It's a strong bond. So I'm just applying a little bit, basically to the joint where the photo etch part is going to go. So that just enough so that when it touches down, it'll stick. Okay, so there you can see that it's securely attached. But it's not so secure that it wouldn't be able to come loose. So I'm going to take a little bit more glue on the end of my toothpick, and I'm going to, the same way as I would if I'm using my Tamiya thin cement, I'm just going to touch it to the joint, just very gently. You might need to use a little bit more glue, but just very gently, and that capillary action, it'll carry the glue right into the seam, and it'll glue it permanently and securely. All right, so there you can see all three parts have been attached. Part of the reason I was so reluctant to get started on this kit is because there is so much photo etch, and I've generally not been very confident when it comes to applying photo etch parts. That's really why I wanted to do my Aston Martin and I-400 submarine, because both of them had a fair amount of photo etch to them, which would allow me to gain some experience and get a little more proficient at applying photo etch parts before moving on to this, which is going to be one of the most complex and complicated builds I've ever done. But so now that that's done, we can attach the cylinder heads, and then this part, which I believe is probably part of a manifold or maybe a carburetor. So we're just going to do a little test fit, which is kind of funny that one cylinder actually fits and stays on just fine, while the other one fits very loosely. But we're just setting it in place and making sure that it sits and fits correctly. So there you go. That's we're about halfway through the assembly of the actual engine block at this point, and it looks so far pretty good. Part of the reason why we test fit is so that we can know where to apply glue to best allow the parts to attach and remain secure. See, when I applied the glue to the second cylinder head here, it actually didn't really it didn't actually help out very much because it wasn't in the right place, because I wasn't paying attention close enough when I was doing my test fitting. So when I attached it, it didn't stay on securely. It kind of flopped around. So I pulled it off and I applied a little bit more glue, and now it's rock solid. Now that all of those are set aside, we're going to move on to the supercharger, which fits onto the back side of the engine, which is probably just about as detailed as the rest of the engine itself is. There's quite a lot of little components and bits and pieces in here, so this should be a lot of fun. So we start. This is our first deviation away from runner H, aside from the photo etch stuff. This is runner E. We're using parts number 6 and 7 from this runner. So there it is, just test fit. You can see it's kind of the coil-shaped spool of ducting. It's quite simple. It's just the two halves. There's, but an actual supercharger would have a fan on the inside that drives more air into the intercoolers, or into the manifolds to produce more engine power. So like I said, it's just dry fit, so let's go ahead and glue it together. Alright, now here's where things get interesting. The instructions here, there's another couple parts of this intercooler setup, and it's calling for parts V7 and V8. Now if you weren't paying close attention to these instructions, these parts on this runner right here, you'd think that these two are the parts that it's calling for, but it's actually not. It's calling for these two on a completely different runner. This is runner E, and all the other intercooler parts, save for a couple, are on this runner. But only these two parts are on runner V. That's because this runner and the rest of the engine actually is a carryover from another kit that Tamiya did that has the same engine, but has a slightly different mounting bracket. And that's what this is. This is the mounting bracket that mounts it to the firewall of the engine, or of the airframe. Now this one, I believe this was originally for one of their Spitfire models. So rather than, you know, be inaccurate and have the wrong mounting point, they simply redesigned the mounting point and added it onto another runner so that they could in fact be as accurate as possible. So I actually was pointed out that by another modeler who made that mistake, and it almost screwed up his entire build because it was too late to repair it. Because if you look at the two side by side, you can see they're very, very similar, but there are some slight differences in the location of the mounting holes and the overall shapes. So if I were to have made that mistake and used this one, I would either have to find a way to break the parts off and redo it, or find some way to make it fit, and be unfortunately inaccurate. Now at this point also it's calling for a screw, or actually a nut rather. Now there's two nuts in this kit, one silver and one black. I believe this is asking me for the silver one. But there is a little diagram on the instruction sheet that is 1:1 scale with the actual nut. So you simply place that over top and make sure, yep, it's the correct shape and size. So we're going to go with that one. And we also need a couple of polycaps. But here you see we've got these two tiny little polycaps, which are actually really, really goddamn small. So I've got to be very careful when attaching them. Because they don't actually attach securely, they just sit in these little channels. And my giant meaty sausage fingers, which I've alluded to many times in the past, aren't very good at attaching these little, placing these little tiny details. So that's why I have decided to get proficient with my tweezers. These are my spring shut tweezers, and I've grown to love them very, very much. Now we've just got to gently massage the nut in place. There it goes. And slide the other half into place. And make sure there's no misalignments. So there you can see the two halves are securely in place, and everything is nice and tight and well attached inside. In studying the instructions, I was able to figure out what this entire assembly is on the backside. It's not specifically an engine mount, it's actually the carburetor, which mounts to the turbocharger, or supercharger rather, as well as, I believe this is probably the magneto and distributor. The entire assembly fits together like so, which then bolts onto the back of the engine like so. We'll put on our drive shaft. Again, we're not gluing anything together just yet, but that's basically your assembled engine. There's a few more detail parts still to be attached, but by and large, this is your assembled engine. Now, in doing this, I've shot this all as one uncut segment, and I'll edit it down, obviously. But just to do this, just to do the basic assembly of this engine took me over an hour. And I work fast, so anything that takes an hour for me is a long time. But like everything else, we're just going to leave this down as the basic engine block and cylinders. We're going to strip all this down to as basic as we can to make it as easy as possible to paint. So the last step of assembly of the engine and this portion of the build is assembly of the oil tank and firewall. The oil tank is in two halves, plus there's a separate hose with cap, and then the firewall itself, which is a separate part. And the firewall secures to everything. Once everything is fully assembled, it fits. It attaches to the carburetor via the screw, or the nut that we installed inside it. So just for a little test fitting, let's go ahead and throw everything together and make sure that everything fits correctly. So that's our engine so far. That's about an hour's worth of work just to assemble that basic engine right there. Yeah, wow. I've built entire kits in less time than it's taken me just to assemble this thing. So really, mad props go out to Tamiya for really going above and beyond with the design of this thing. This thing is seriously impressive. In the engineering, the parts breakdown, the detail of it, like the detail on the rivets, on the bottom. On the oil, what I assume is the oil pan. The drive shaft itself has all the grooves in it that you would expect on a real drive shaft for one of these Merlin engines. Like this, they could package this and sell this as a complete kit in and of itself, and make money. That's how nice this thing is. I mean, this is incredible. Right down to like the detail on the supercharger. I talked a little bit the nice detail on the intake manifold and the photo etch parts that just went down perfectly. Everything about this is just wow. I am seriously impressed. And if the rest of the kit is even half this good, I'm in for a real treat with this thing. I can understand why Tamiya's 32nd scale World War II aircraft have been getting such high praise, because this is incredible. As it is, none of it's glued together. I mean, this portion is glued together, and then there's the separate sub-assemblies for the aft end, for the supercharger and the carburetor and the firewall and whatnot. These will all get painted over the next day or two. The instructions just call for basic semi-gloss black. I'm going to do some more research. Maybe I come up with some better color matching, see if maybe that might work a little bit better than just straight semi-gloss black. But even if I just go that route, I'm sure it's going to look fantastic, because you know this molding is incredible, and you know, I could assemble it and just leave it unpainted and it would look great. I'm sorry I'm rambling, but wow, I cannot get over how impressive this is. Yeah, I'm swooning over this. It's incredible. So anyway, that's where I'm going to leave you for tonight. We're going to come back next time, and I think we're going to get started on painting the engine. I want to have the engine finished by the end of the weekend. It's Wednesday today, and I've got a few things to do tomorrow, and probably going to be working most of the weekend. But I should be able to have the engine fully assembled, finished, and painted by the end of the weekend. Might move on to the cockpit if I have the time. But for now, we're going to leave it where it is. So thank you out there, everybody, for watching, and happy modeling.